Good morning. Thanks for joining us. How has your year started? We're getting along here, right? It's like it's not the first of the year anymore. I know some people are off to a great start and other people not so much. Are you where you want to be? You know, one of the great things about Scripture is it's a meta-narrative. There's so much to the story, but there's so many people that they were not living the dream, and yet somehow God turned it around and God used them. They didn't find themselves where they wanted to be. I want to share a verse from Genesis chapter 50, verse 20, and I want to give a shout out to Max Lucado and his book For Tough Times. This is Joseph speaking, and it's at the end of the story, and what a narrative the Joseph story is. Preached on it a couple years ago, one of my favorite sermon series ever. You intended to harm me, he says to his brothers, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. Do you trust God to tell a better story with your life? Do you trust that God is in the midst of what you don't want to be happening right now? And maybe you created the mess, maybe somebody else did, but you're in it. God is able to turn it around. Give it to Him today. Let's just consider a few people from Scripture. Joseph, phenomenal story, but do you think he really wanted to be sold into slavery by his brothers? Do you think he wanted to be thrown in prison when he was in Egypt? I don't think so. He had so many things that went wrong. And how about Moses? How about Moses? He's out there for 40 years working in the wilderness. That wasn't his plan. He really wanted to see his people set free. That's why he killed the Egyptian. But then he messes up, and now he's out there on the backside of the desert. How about Daniel? Daniel was like the West Point cadet. He was the Ivy Leaguer. He's brilliant. He's all these things, and he's in exile. Life stinks. That's not where he doesn't want to be in Babylon. He wants to be at home. He wants to be in Jerusalem. He yearned to be there. So you got Joseph in prison, Moses in the desert, and Daniel in chains. But Joseph was just a day away from being the prime minister. And the part of the story that I really like with Moses is, and I never really thought of it, and I pulled out maps to look at it, he needed some desert training. Why? He had 40 years of training in the desert because he was going to have 40 more years in the desert. You know, that's what happens when you start talking to bushes. But do you see that God was training him? That right in the middle of what you think is not a good situation for you, God's getting you ready for like the best chapters of your life. For Moses, it was what made him famous. And for Daniel, he became the advisor to the king, the confidant. All these people were not where they wanted to be, and yet they bloomed where they were planted. I know it's kind of cliche, but grab a hold of that. If you find yourself in a situation you don't want to be in, you can choose to look to God and bloom where you're planted. God bless you. Have a great week.